Three fake HOA cops cornered Marcus, ready to arrest him over violations. But when he looked up, they saw something in his eyes that made them realize they picked the wrong man. "Stop right there, sir. Hands where we can see them." Those were the first words Marcus heard as he stepped out of his brand-new SUV, grocery bags dangling from his fingers. The late afternoon sun glinted off the windshield as three men in dark, tactical-looking uniforms stormed across his driveway. Their boots were loud, too loud for a group whose jurisdiction usually involved mailbox paint chips. Marcus squinted. The badges on their chests were metallic, but not polished like real law enforcement insignia. In the center was a strange emblem, crossed rakes behind a picket fence, encircled by the words, HOA Enforcement Police. He almost laughed. HOA Police? He muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His neighborhood's homeowners association had always been infamous for nitpicky fines, leaving a trash bin visible for 10 minutes too long, planting tulips instead of HOA-approved chrysanthemums, allowing grass to reach a scandalous 3.5 inches. But this? Tactical gear? Flashing lights? Badges? That was new. The tallest of the trio marched forward, chest thrust out like he'd spent his morning practicing in the mirror. "Marcus Grant," he bellowed, "you are under arrest for multiple HOA violations. Step away from your vehicle immediately, or force will be used." From behind windows and half-opened blinds, curious neighbors emerged like meerkats. Curtains twitched. Phones were already up and recording. A few people whispered excitedly, no doubt hoping their HOA Facebook group was about to get dramatic. Marcus carefully set his grocery bags on the driveway. Not out of fear, he'd seen scarier things than middle-aged men wielding clipboards, but because he knew exactly what this was. This wasn't an arrest. It was a last-ditch power play. And the so-called HOA police had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. "Gentlemen," Marcus said calmly, "why don't you show me your badges again?" The lead officer's smirk twitched, but he tried to hold his ground. "You heard me. Turn around. Hands behind your back." Marcus didn't move. Instead, he took one measured step forward. Gravel crunched under his shoe, quiet, controlled, deliberate. And that single step changed everything. The three men shifted unconsciously, their formation faltering. Something in Marcus's eyes, cool, steady, and carrying a weight none of them recognized, told them they weren't in control anymore. Marcus reached out and tapped the badge on the lead man's chest with one finger. "Cheap metal," he said softly. "Laser cut. Wrong font. And the seal?" He tilted his head. "Not even a good copy. Completely counterfeit." The man flinched and the other two exchanged worried looks. How would you know that?" One stammered, his bravado leaking out with every syllable. Marcus leaned closer until the man could feel his breath. "Because," he whispered, "I trained the real ones." Silence slammed into the driveway like a shockwave. Behind curtains, neighbors froze mid-recording, phones trembling slightly. They had always wondered what Marcus did. He kept to himself, but was never unfriendly, never odd, just quiet, helpful. The guy who shoveled other people's driveways without being asked, the guy who never drew attention. No one knew that the bland suburban exterior hid something precise, disciplined, and forged in the darkest corners of federal operations. Marcus Grant wasn't just some homeowner with a well-trimmed lawn. He was one of the FBI's high-risk, deep operations specialists, the kind of agent criminals prayed they'd never meet in a dark alley, or a bright driveway, the kind with a perfect record. But Marcus had walked away from that life. He wanted quiet, stillness, normalcy. Unfortunately for these three imposters, today was not going to be quiet, and it definitely wasn't going to be normal. The tallest impersonator lunged forward and grabbed Marcus's arm, fumbling for the cuffs on his belt, a fatal mistake. Marcus moved before the crowd even registered motion. In a blur of precision, he twisted the man's wrist sideways, controlled, efficient, just enough pressure to drop him without breaking bone. With his free hand, Marcus ripped the fake badge from the man's chest and stepped back, fluid as water. The impersonator collapsed to his knees with a cry that echoed across the driveway. Gasps burst from the spectators. Curtains snapped open wider. The other two men scrambled, panic overtaking whatever cheap intimidation training they'd rehearsed. Both reached for their weapons, plastic, taser-shaped, clearly bought online. Click. But before they could activate them, Marcus struck. He kicked one device clean out of the first man's grip. It skittered across the pavement like a startled insect. The second man barely had time to raise his arm before Marcus knocked the taser away and spun him into the side of the SUV, pinning him effortlessly. "Hey, you can't do that!" the disarmed man shouted, voice cracking. Marcus held up the badge he'd taken. "You see this?" He pointed to the tiny pinhole camera embedded near the edge. "This isn't just fake. It's a recording device, probably meant for blackmail, maybe extortion." Neighbors murmured in shock. "These HOA-style scams have been popping up across 3 counties," Marcus continued. "Phony enforcement officers tricking homeowners, collecting violation fees, filming confrontations." All 3 men froze in horror. How did he know that? Marcus exhaled slowly. "Because the FBI's been hunting you for months." Right then, the radio on the fallen man's belt crackled to life. A nervous voice whispered, "Did you get him yet? We need the footage." Marcus picked up the radio and spoke clearly. "This is Special Agent Marcus Grant, and your little operation is officially over." The silence that followed was colder than ice. Within minutes, flashing lights washed across the street, turning the quiet suburban cul-de-sac into a crime scene, red and blue reflected off windows, cars, and stunned faces as officers poured out of their cruisers with practiced urgency. Weapons were drawn, until they recognized the man standing calmly beside 3 subdued suspects. "Agent Grant?" the police sergeant said, disbelief carving lines across his face. "You're the one who called this in?" "Yes," Marcus replied, stepping aside so the officers could secure the imposters. "These men were impersonating law enforcement, detaining residents under fake HOA violations, likely tied to the extortion ring we've been tracking across the county." The fake officers stared at Marcus, then at the real police, bewildered that they switched from tactical alert to respectful cooperation the instant they heard Marcus's name. How do they know who you are?" one finally managed. The sergeant let out a breath that was half laugh, half awe. "Son," he said, looking down at the cuffed man, "you're standing in front of the agent who cracked the Riverstone kidnapping case, the same guy who dismantled the interstate fraud ring last year. Criminals have a nickname for him, the Ghost." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Phones that had been recording out of curiosity were now filming out of sheer astonishment. The fake HOA officers blanched. One looked like he might faint. Real handcuffs replaced their cheap replicas with sharp metallic clicks. As an officer guided them toward the cruiser, one whispered, We had no idea who he was." Marcus gave a small shrug. "You should have just knocked like normal people." Laughter broke out across the neighborhood, relieved, incredulous, buzzing with energy. But as the last cruiser door shut, the sergeant turned back to Marcus with a look of concern. "Agent, there's something else you need to know. Something about this ring." And suddenly the street was quiet again. When the chaos finally settled, lights dimmed and the last of the cruisers rolled away, the neighborhood converged on Marcus like a wave. People approached cautiously at first, then all at once, thanking him, asking questions, trying to piece together what they had just witnessed. Marcus lifted his hands in a gentle, calming gesture. "Look, I'm not here to scare anyone," he said with that steady, understated calm that suddenly made perfect sense. "I moved here for the same reasons you all did. Peace, normalcy, a place where the loudest thing at night is a sprinkler timer." A ripple of soft laughter moved through the crowd. But scams are getting smarter, Marcus continued. He pointed at the fake badge lying abandoned on the pavement, its tiny camera still blinking faintly. People will pretend to be anything: police, HOA enforcement, government agents. They rely on panic to get compliance. The crowd leaned in, hanging on every word. This, Marcus said, lifting the badge with 2 fingers, this could fool almost anyone who isn't trained to see the details. Neighbors exchanged worried looks, suddenly aware of vulnerabilities they'd never considered. So here's what I want you to remember, Marcus said gently. If something feels off, trust that feeling. Call real authorities. Don't open your door just because someone has a uniform. And don't let fear make you a target. A woman near the front, Mrs. Holloway, the one who always baked lemon bars for block parties, looked up at him nervously. Marcus, are you staying here? After everything today? He smiled, the warmth returning to his expression. Of course I am. This is home, and I look out for my home. The sergeant approached again, clearing his throat. Agent Grant, we'll need a statement downtown. Marcus slipped into his jacket. Understood. Save me a cup of coffee. As he walked toward the cruiser, neighbors waved, some excited, some stunned, all changed. Whispers floated behind him. We've been living next to the most feared FBI agent in the state, and he was mowing his lawn like nothing. And from that day on, no one ever looked at Marcus Grant quite the same way again. And so, when the flashing lights faded and the fake officers were hauled away, Brookside Estates was never the same. The neighbors who once saw Marcus as just the polite guy with the perfect lawn now looked at him with a mix of awe, respect, and a little fear. He didn't seek attention. He didn't brag. He simply protected his home the only way he knew how, with precision, calm, and absolute authority. From that day forward, no one doubted him, questioned him, or underestimated him, because everyone in that neighborhood now knew the truth. Their quietest neighbor was also their greatest shield.